Well, day's finally come. I'm off of work. It's nice outside. I got nothing else to do, and it's a long weekend. I want to go riding tomorrow, so I'm getting the brakes done on the front of the Magna, and it will be good to go. Anyhow, stick around and see what happens. Well, here we are at the front, and for as much hassle as I've been through to get this done, it's going to be surprisingly easy to do, because all I got to do is loosen this bolt and the whole caliper is just going to pivot straight up. I'm going to drop the pads out, clean up the caliper. Well, I'm going to take the caliper off so I can clean the pistons up, clean all this gunk out of there as good as I can, and the front axle and the pinch bolts have already been torqued down. I'm not taking the wheel off because I don't have to. The fork seals were just replaced, and that was done at the shop. I am going to check the torque, and then we're going to mark those up with a paint marker. Now I've checked my my caliper thickness with the dial caliper, and I do have way better than 0.4 millimeter of thickness left on here. I'll just rotate this around, and I'm going to look for any kind of scorch marks or anything that looks nasty. I mean, it looks pretty nice. I don't see anything. Just feeling across it, I don't feel anything unusual. Okay, so let me don't need to bleed these out. I already did that when I changed the fluid. So first off, we'll just pop this hose out of its little standoff bracket thing there, so that when I tilt the caliper up, it's got something to hang on to. And I'll just crack off this bolt here. Oh yeah, of course, because I haven't done them. It's ridiculously tight. There we go. You know, these have a torque spec. However, I am not following that torque spec. I'm grabbing another socket. That one, that bolt right there was, guys, a 12 millimeter. So if I back this bolt all the way out, this is a shouldered bolt. Of course, I want to look at this just to make sure nobody's over torqued it, and we will put some never sees on that thread. This whole guy will now just rotate up and out of the way, but I'm taking it all the way off because, like I said, it makes no sense to do this job if you aren't gonna fully do it and clean the caliper out. And there are other videos out there to do that. Del Boy's Garage has one. Basically, you just barely pump the piston out with the brake lever so that you can get access to the edge of the two pots inside the brake caliper, or the pistons, so you can clean the contamination off the edge. This bolt might be a little bit more feisty to loosen up, but we'll get crack. Well, thank goodness that isn't frozen up in there, because a lot of times that's what happens. So I need to go get a bungee to hang this caliper. I'll be right back. Alrighty, so caliper's off. There's the bracket, and I gotta clean some gunk off of there. That the upper bolt is a guide pin, because once again the piston's only on one side, and there's still plenty of material on here. That kind of blue color is interesting. Wonder what that's all about. Anyhow, it's got some anti-rattle shims on the back of these pads. But these pads are captured in with these pins here, so we've got to push this dude up. Oh, wait a minute. Aha! We have a nut. I must go procure a metric tool to undo that nut, and then that bracket will come off, and then the pins will come out. And you can see the tail end of the pins. And the pins are what hold these pads in place, but you can see they're not hung up. They're nice and free. Not too much crud around here, but we're going to clean it all up. Be right back. Alrighty, I got the that screw out. It was a 10 millimeter. So what we got here is that frees up this bracket, and it should theoretically pop right off just like that. And yeah, once again, I don't have enough hands, so now I can withdraw these pins, and that's going to take 2 hands. So let me extract these 2 pins, and then the pads will come right out. Alright, so these pins actually come out from this side, not that side. And it doesn't say that in the manual. Once again, the details, it just says remove pins. So even though I have a proper Honda shop manual for this bike, you got to use your common sense on this stuff. Alright, so once again I need 2 hands, so let me get those pins out. But anyhow, I decided just to use an Allen wrench to push those through. You can use a drift pin, I guess, if you got one. Alright, okay, pins are out. Now I can extricate. Ooh, fancy words. These pads, which, once again, I'm going to have both hands for, so, alright, hold on. Pads are out. And, if you ever wanted to know what pads look like when they've glazed up a bit, that's what they look like. They get really shiny, and they pretty much look just like the surface of the rotor. And these almost have like a copper sheen to them. But one thing I noticed is, I don't know how well that shows up in the camera, but ASKNI, it's the same markings that are on the calipers. Now, I've seen Honda aftermarket, or not aftermarket, I'm sorry, Honda replacement pads that are Honda branded, and they don't look like this. My guess is that these dudes are the original pads from this bike. And given the bike only has 10,000 miles, yeah, and I just turned 10,000 on it. It had only about 8,200 on it when I bought it, so I haven't even put that many miles on it. Those are the original pads. And one difference to note here is that these are like locating pins almost, riveted into the anti-squeal backing. They ain't coming off. I don't think I really need them for the EBC pads. The EBC pads look identical with the exception of that, and they have a lot more brake pad material on them instead of all this extra metal here for whatever they thought they needed on the back side. I don't know, maybe it's there to dissipate heat. But I'm to the point now where these are going to go in the bin. I'm going to clean up my parts, I'm going to put stuff back together, then I'll be done with this job. So, here's my EBC pads, and I haven't got them out of the package yet. You can tell that they're a lot thicker, and they're same general shape, but they don't have all the rivet looking things on the back of them. So I'm not worried about it. I mean, these are carbon metallic according to my order sheet, so I'm hoping that they'll stop a lot better. They certainly gotta work better than 20+ odd year old glazed over brake pads. Now if you wanted to use those old brake pads, you still could. What you would do is you would sand the surface of this down to break that just that layer of material out. And I've got a pretty nifty setup for the guitar work I do, where I've got a surface plate that a machinist would use, a granite surface plate, which is machined to be dead flat, and I would put 180 sticky back sandpaper on there. I don't know, it's pretty tore up. It would probably take an 80 grit. It's got a nice chunk missing out of that right there with a big score mark. The copper look to it is just freaking me out. I just it's interesting. Like, is there copper inside that? Anyhow, let me get this all cleaned up and I'll be back. Alrighty, it's time to start putting all this mess back together again. And I have the lovely, talented, and awesome Miss Melly on my camera. Yay! Shut up. You. Alright, first things first. I gotta take get these brake pads off the safety. This is caliper grease, and it's what goes on the guide pins. Now, this is actually supposed to float, and through the piston on the caliper is only on one side, so caliper body itself actually has to kind of move over as the brakes are being actuated, and it does that through these guide pins. And it just needs a little bit of grease on there. And so that one's all prepped up. The other one's actually just a through bolt. This is the only one that's the guide pin that has to be greased up. Alrighty, so before I put that guy back on, I actually need to get this mounted back on the fork. The speedo cable just snaps through there. This goes on the back side. And we had all kinds of lovely fun cleaning the crud off all these parts. I need to put a little bit of never seize on the end of these bolts, just on the very ends, because if you look at how it goes through, this isn't threaded, just the very end of that. And I don't need to kill it with never seize either, just a little bit on the end, because it would be nice to one day get these parts back apart if I had to. My finger as the proper applicator. Not a bad day, is it now?
Nope.
Mel has a speech impediment. She can only answer in monosyllable, single word answers, right, Mel?
Yep.
That came with a dirty look, I think. Alright. And those guys are 14 mils. So I'll just tighten them back up. There's the Torx back in the book. It's not a lot, because I don't know. I don't think these bolts are under a whole lot of stress, but I'm not going to get the torque wrench out for them. If they were the pinch nuts or the wheel bolt, I probably would, but in this case, I'm just going to get close to the end of the torque wrench, or the ratchet handle, and just cinch them up. Because they don't need to be aped on there. You'll never get them back off, because it's a steel thread going into cast aluminum. And if if you strip that out, you'll have to cut the bolt heads off, and then you have to find another bracket, and it's a nightmare. And that is tight enough. So next part comes this little anti-rattle clip, which I think might actually be made out of copper, of all things. And the caliper's all cleaned out. We pulled the brake lever and pushed the pistons out just slightly so I can clean around them, because there's always a layer of crud just resting right under the edge, unless they've been pushed out already from worn pads, which we really didn't have. We just had crappy pads, not necessarily worn. Alright, next pieces that go on are the pads themselves, and they are identical left to right. There's not really a difference in size. Sorry. Just load them in there, and the retaining pins just get pushed in through. These just get cleaned off. They don't get, there's no threads on them or anything like that. And I literally pushed them out by hand after 20 some odd years that this bike's been around. So I am not going to run the risk of putting any kind of anti-seize on them because of their proximity to the brake pads. But they are fun to get through. This is the part where everybody tunes out or goes to sleep or gets a beer. Yeah, it's on the other channel, man. I can't believe this dude's been pushing these pins in for like an hour. Well, what do you want for free entertainment, right? There we go. At this stage, I look at it this way: if I can't push these pins through by hand, then then they'll be too tight, and then the pads are probably going to hang up inside the caliper. So I want to be able to push them through by hand, and it's just a matter of lining all this business up here, because you can see that this pad's basically vertical and this one's got a little bit of a lean going on, and it's partially because of that little spring that's in there. It's fighting me every inch of the way to get this pin to line up. Alrighty, after much hassle, got the pins all the way through and they're now sticking up. Proud of the caliper itself, and then you've got this little retaining plate, which is key index, or key hold, I guess. So you just push it down. And then there's a little 10mm bolt that goes on the end. I better put some anti-seize on that, because I remember it didn't want to come out very easily. Of course there's a cat. There's always got to be a cat giving me grief. Shut! Oh, he saw a bird. He's distracted now. He's all happy that he saw a bird. Nope, back to us. This bolt just holds on that bracket, and it does not have to get completely aped on there, as tight as it'll go. I mean, that right there is going to be good enough. Alrighty. The cat's driving me nuts. I gotta push these pads back into the brake housing, and I gotta go get me my big screwdriver, because I don't think it's out here. Alrighty, so I got a big screwdriver here, and I'm just pushing it in and gently twisting. That's it. And I mean, I'm not pushing hard. If your caliper, if the pistons in the caliper doesn't move easy, it's probably frozen. If you have to force that together, you've got a problem. So that slides on there. Get this little rubber boot where he needs to be. That is where the guide pin that we greased up earlier goes. It goes in here. And actually, let me let the caliper hang just a little bit, because once again, I have to put, it's kind of like mixing materials here. I have to put a little bit of never seize on these threads, because this is a hardened steel bolt going into aluminum. And you will get galvanic corrosion, and it will be all kinds of fun trying to get that bolt out if it decides that it's going to freeze on there. It's one of those ones where you just cry because you know you're in for pain and you got to go and fix that later. So I'm wiggling the caliper around until I can see through the threaded hole that the boot isn't crushed or folded over on itself, and just wiggle the screw in. Now the screw is not actually round on the end of it where it's got the shoulder. It's actually got 3 flat sides, and those flat sides hold the grease that you put in there. I think I need to get this other screw in to help align it. So here's the actual shoulder bolt that holds the caliper in place. Home stretch, Mel.
Yay.
That's way too much. Got the patented applicator. Who knew there was all this involved with changing brakes on your bike? I remember the first bike I had was an '86 Magna, and I changed the brakes on it. I didn't do any of this crap. I just swapped out the pads, that's all I did. Yep, good enough. Probably death on the highway waiting to happen there. See, now that I got that bolt down there in, this one at the top turns a lot easier because it's lined up. It was probably, the caliper was probably twisted slightly. But let me get this guide bolt. Now I read the Honda manual. This manual that was written for this bike was written in '87, and I think it was very poorly translated Japanese to English. Because a lot of this stuff where there should be detailed information on exactly the procedure and order for doing stuff, it just says, remove bolt, remove caliper, remove this. Like the assumption is that you just figured out all the little ins and outs and the details of how all that stuff happens. And they don't always give torque specs for all the bolts either. So once again, hardened steel bolt, it's going into an aluminum casting. So I'm choked right up on my ratchet, so I can't get enough leverage to over tighten it. Basically, at that point, and I can't turn it any tighter, and it's tight enough. So that one is a 12 mil. I believe this other one is a 14. I believe that's it. That's job done. Oh, what is it that Mark Evans always says? Sorted. Him and Pete Mate. I think I need to watch A Bike is Born or Reborn again. Alrighty. Now I gotta pull the brake lever to pump the fluid back into the piston. make sure brakes aren't dragging, which they aren't. I mean, they're always going to touch the caliper. They only retract slightly when you let off the brake lever. But I forgot to do one thing. This little rubber, I don't know how you call that, grommet. It needs to go in this little bracket here because it's what helps hold that brake hose up and out of the way. Now, I have not been able to find a stainless steel brake line for this bike, a kit. I do know that they have kind of build-it-yourself kits, because getting a stainless steel brake hose actually improves the braking feel in your hand. Because while this hose is very strong, a stainless braided one that's as the hydraulic fluid is pumped into the cylinder and it meets the resistance of the disc from the piston, what's going to happen is that pressure is going to start backing up in the hose, and the rubber hose is actually going to want to swell outwards. Old rubber hoses actually swell quite a lot, and it'll make your brakes feel spongy over time. A hose that's stainless steel braided, come here Mel, come around the side. Hoses that look just like this, these are oil lines, but the brake hoses would look very similar. This stainless steel braiding can't be forced out because of its weave. So when you hit the brakes, that tendency for the hose to want to swell outwards is met by the braiding of the stainless steel, and it gives you more responsive feel to the brake because it feels solid, because it can't squish out. Don't overfill the reservoir, because when you push in that piston back, the fluid's going to feed back into the master cylinder, or the brake cylinder, and it's just going to squirt out the air vent hole. And you can see, come in Mel, brake fluid is very corrosive and it will eat the paint right off your stuff. Now, I bought the bike like this, but I'm telling you, this is what happened. Somebody put too much fluid in there and they went to go push those pistons back in to do a brake service, and it glooped right out the little air vent hole right there. Now, if that fell on your tank, you would cry a river, because it would just eat the paint right off your fuel tank. This poor bike, I swear. I don't know what kind of crap the previous owner did or did not do. I just know that the bike was not treated well. But that is the job done, Mel. All I got to do is go through and mark all my little bolts to make sure they don't loop back off, and get it off the lift, and it's ready to ride tomorrow. Cool, right, Mel?
Yep.
Alright, well, that was it. It's finally done. Okay, well, it's a done deal. Wheels all cleaned up and polished. Just in time too, because I'm running out of daylight. You can tell because we got our patio lights on here. But I'm going to enjoy a nice ride tomorrow for sure. Oh hey, a little bit off subject, but I don't know how easily you can see this, but I swapped out the dash lights with LEDs. Probably can't tell. Yeah, I guess they light up pretty good. Anywho, it's way better than the originals. I can actually read the instruments at night. Well, she's all done. Thanks for hanging out and watching this series of videos. There's probably going to be some more, but most of these projects are related to restoring my Magna and not necessarily modifying it. Any mods that I do are either going to be to improve it, or because I just can't get a part to do whatever repair I need to do. Anywho, take care, cheers, and talk to you later.